Danger lurks beneath Thames. World War II bomb-laden wreck SS Richard Montgomery nears collapse in the Thames Estuary. A decades-old bomb-filled wreck resting at the bottom of the Thames Estuary is showing alarming signs of structural failure, raising fears of a catastrophic explosion that could trigger a devastating tsunami. An American cargo ship sunk during World War II, carrying around 1,400 tons of explosives, is now edging dangerously close to collapse. Now let's get deep dive into this AI podcast.
Welcome to this deep dive. You've brought us a pretty fascinating and frankly slightly unsettling subject today. The SS Richard Montgomery.
That's right.
Now, most people who follow maritime news or maybe local history around the Thames Estuary, they'll know of this wreck near Sheerness, a World War II relic. But the sources you've pulled together, they suggest there's a critical new chapter, something pointing towards maybe real urgency.
Absolutely. We're not just looking at, dusty history here. We're diving into very recent reports, actual surveys. They give us a current snapshot of the Montgomery's condition.
Okay.
It's a wreck. Yeah, it's been monitored for decades. We know that. But these latest findings, they are raising some pretty significant red flags.
Right. So our mission then for this deep dive is to get you quickly informed on what these sources tell us about the SS Richard Montgomery right now.
Exactly.
We need to understand the evidence for this decay, the potential risks which sound pretty catastrophic, and, crucially, what the authorities are actually saying and doing about it.
And how that compares to local concerns.
Yes, versus what people nearby are feeling. It's really a look into a potential ticking time bomb scenario using the latest data we have.
Okay, so just to quickly set the scene for anyone who maybe just knows the name vaguely, the SS Richard Montgomery, it was an American Liberty ship.
Right. Built quickly during the war.
Built quickly, yeah, to carry vital supplies. So August 1944, it's anchored in the Thames Estuary near Sheerness. A storm hits, it drags anchor, grounds on a sandbank.
And didn't it break apart pretty quickly?
It did. Eventually just broke its back, split in two right there.
And the crucial bit, the reason we're still talking about it, 80 years later, it wasn't empty when it went down.
Far from it. That's the whole issue. It went down carrying an estimated 1,400 tons of munitions.
1,400 tons. What kind of explosives are we talking about?
It's a nasty mix, really. WWII stuff, fragmentation bombs, general purpose bombs, even some of those big blockbusters. And that lethal cargo is why it's still considered one of Britain's most dangerous wartime wrecks. It's not even that deep. It sits in about 15 meters of water.
It's shallow enough that for years you could actually see the masts sticking out.
Yeah, exactly. 3 masts were visible above the surface for a long, long time. A constant reminder.
Okay, so the wreck, the explosives, they've been there, a known risk, for ages. What do these recent surveys, the ones in your sources, what do they reveal that takes this from just, a persistent hazard to what some people are calling a growing crisis?
Well, the core message, reading through these detailed surveys, it's pretty stark. The vessel is showing alarming, accelerated signs of deterioration.
Accelerated, so not just slow rust, but speeding up.
That's what the data suggests. The process seems to be gathering pace.
Okay, let's get into the specifics then. What do they actually find? What's falling apart?
Well, remember, it's split back in 44, that original fracture point. And the surveys show it's now experiencing really significant erosion and destabilization. The bits that were left unsupported where it broke, they're collapsing even further into that gap on the seabed.
So the original break is getting worse, actively widening or crumbling.
Seems so. And it's clear the structural integrity of the sections that are left is, it's compromised. Take the forward part of the wreck.
Okay.
It's tilting noticeably. The sources say in just the last 2 years, it's shifted eastward by more than half a meter.
Half a meter in 2 years. On a ship packed with explosives. That sounds incredibly unstable.
It's definitely cause for concern. And if you look at specific areas like hold number 2, the second cargo hold, it gets even more worrying. The sources detail actual cracks appearing, buckling in the whole plating there.
Cracks and buckling.
Yes, and structural collapse is actually starting. Parts of the deck are beginning to be pulled down into the hold in that area.
The deck is caving in. Seriously.
That's what the survey indicates. And even the supports for the hatches in that same area hold 2 critical structural bits.
What about them?
They've sunk by up to 17 centimeters in just 12 months.
17 centimeters in a year.
Yeah.
That's rapid failure happening right there.
It's not static decay, is it? It's dynamic. We're seeing active, measurable change reported.
Wow. Okay.
And it's not just one spot. The rear section, the stern, is also under severe stress. The sources use the term hogging.
Hogging. What does that mean in ship terms?
Basically, the middle section is sagging downwards relative to the ends, like it's bending in the middle.
Right.
Which, again, is just another sign of major structural strain. It's approaching breaking points.
Okay, so the ship itself is, it sounds like it's visibly and measurably falling apart based on these surveys. But wasn't there something else, something critical about the ground under the wreck? The seabed.
Yes, and this detail from the seabed survey specifically, this might actually be the most significant finding for understanding why some of this movement is happening.
Go on.
In one really critical area near the bow, they found that 1.6 meters of sediment, basically the sandbank supporting the ship, has just eroded away, vanished in a single year.
1.6 meters, 1.5 meters of support gone in 12 months. That's huge erosion.
It's drastic. And the direct result, well, this erosion has seriously undercut the front section of the ship. Imagine pulling the foundations out from under one end of a building.
Which would explain the tilting you mentioned. It's shifting because there's nothing holding it up there anymore.
Precisely. And that movement, the shifting driven by the seabed washing away, it puts enormous, dangerous new stresses on the hull, which is already, as we've said, fragile, cracking, buckling.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. Erosion causes movement. Movement stresses the weak structure, which could lead to collapse. It's a very dangerous cycle.
Okay, so we have this wreck packed with 1,400 tons of WW2 explosives. It's clearly deteriorating fast. The structure's failing. The seabed's washing away. What do the sources say could happen if the worst occurs? If this fragile state leads to a detonation?
This is where those long-standing fears, the ones talked about for decades, really come into sharp focus. The potential outcomes are, frankly, terrifying. They still reference a 1970 report from the Royal Military College of Science on this.
Still relevant today.
Apparently so. And what does that report predict if those explosives, or a large portion of them, were to go off together?
What does it say?
It paints a picture of a massive explosion, powerful enough to throw a column of water, mud, debris, wreckage up to 3,000 meters into the air.
3,000 meters. That's nearly 2 miles high. Just a colossal blast.
An immense physical force, yes. And immediately following that blast, it could generate a huge wave. The report mentions a potential 5-meter tsunami hitting the nearby coastline.
A 5-meter wave. In the Thames Estuary. That area is heavily populated, lots of infrastructure.
It could be devastating. Communities like Sheerness, right there, south end across the water.
Yeah.
They'd be directly impacted.
So the blast itself, then a massive wave.
The combination could destroy ports, buildings, infrastructure for miles around. Widespread environmental damage is a given, and tragically, the potential for significant loss of life is very real.
That is, a truly stark picture of the risk here. Okay, so given these really alarming survey findings and knowing these potential consequences, what are the authorities doing? What do the sources say about the official response from the UK government?
Well, the Department for Transport, the DFT, they have taken noticeable action recently.
What action?
They've declared an emergency no-fly zone directly over the wreck site.
A no-fly zone. Why now? Is that standard for shipwrecks?
Well, the sources say it was based specifically on updated expert recommendations. The idea is to minimize any potential risk, even tiny ones.
So what does it restrict?
The Civil Aviation Authority, the CAA, has banned civilian aircraft, drones, anything non-emergency from flying within a defined airspace around the site. The thinking seems to be, let's eliminate even the smallest chance of something from the air disturbing things. Vibration, maybe, or worse.
Okay, so they are reacting to the new information, a concrete safety measure. But your sources also mention some, let's say, tension around the official messaging.
I do. There's a bit of a disconnect. A DFT spokesperson put out a statement, standard procedure.
And what did it say?
Emphasized public safety is the top priority, naturally. But they also said the wreck's condition remains stable.
Stable?
Yes. And that experts are continuing to monitor it, and that the no-fly zone is just a precautionary measure based on this updated expert guidance.
Okay, hang on. We just talked through survey findings, showing it splitting further, tilting 0.5 meter, the deck caving in, 1.6 meters of seabed gone in a year.
Yeah.
How does that square with the official line that it remains stable? How's that being received? according to your sources.
That's exactly where the friction seems to be, especially highlighted by local authorities. Daniel Cowan, who's the leader of Southend Council, is quoted.
And what's his take?
He expresses, let's say, significant concern about that specific message. He basically says being told it's stable and the no-fly zone is just precautionary. Well, it doesn't feel like enough clarity.
Right, it feels like downplaying the survey results.
Perhaps what he and presumably the community he represents are looking for is clear information on the long-term strategy. What's the actual plan here?
So it's not just about the immediate step, the no-fly zone. It's about, okay, what happens next year, the year after, especially if this decay is accelerating.
Precisely. His argument, as reflected in the sources, is pretty straightforward. People living near this thing, this potential disaster zone, they deserve a more transparent, detailed explanation of what steps are actually being taken to prevent those catastrophic outcomes we talked about.
So you've got this tension, official reassurance versus the local demand for, well, the full picture on an evolving threat.
That sums it up well.
Okay. Beyond the monitoring, which you said is ongoing, and this new no-fly zone, are there any other specific actions happening? Anything mentioned in the sources about dealing with the wreck itself?
Yes, monitoring is definitely ongoing, which seems crucial given everything we've discussed. And there are actual plans moving forward to remove the 3 masts.
The ones that used to stick out of the water. Why take those down now? They've been there for 80 years.
The reasoning, according to the sources, is about risk mitigation. The fear is that if one of those heavy masts were to suddenly collapse on its own.
Due to age and corrosion.
Exactly. That collapse could physically disturb the ship's structure underneath on the seabed.
And in its current fragile state.
That disturbance, is seen as a potential trigger, something that could potentially set off the explosives. So removing them carefully is a proactive step, taking away one potential, albeit maybe small, ignition source.
Got it. Okay, it's a really complex situation. You've got history, cutting-edge surveys, risk management, local politics, all tangled up. So stepping back for a second, why does this particular deep dive, this story of the SS Richard Montgomery wreck, why does it matter to you, the listener, tuning in?
Well, I think it's a really potent example, isn't it, of how historical events, like a world war, can leave behind these incredibly long-lasting physical dangers, things that persist for generations.
Yeah, 80 years and counting.
And it shines a light on the huge challenges, technical, financial, logistical, of managing these major environmental and safety risks when there's no easy fix. I mean, how do you safely deal with 1,400 tons of unstable explosives sunk in estuary mud?
It's mind-boggling. And as the sources really lay bare, it's also a case study in that difficult communication tightrope authorities have to walk. Right?
Absolutely.
How do you balance reassuring the public about immediate safety measures while also being honest about potentially worsening long-term risks, especially when you don't have all the answers or the easy solutions?
It forces us, and hopefully you listening, to think about that balance. What's the right approach?
Definitely. So let's try and wrap up this deep dive. We've seen how recent surveys are showing really alarming, accelerated decay in the SS Richard Montgomery.
Driven, it seems, at least partly by significant seabed erosion washing away support near the bow.
Which increases the already massive risk of a catastrophic explosion. Experts still point to warnings of a huge blast, maybe a 5-meter tsunami hitting Sheerness in Southend. In response, the authorities have put up this emergency no-fly zone based on expert advice. But that action is kind of set against local leaders who are saying, wait, calling it stable isn't enough? We need clarity. We need a long-term plan.
Yeah, the sources don't just detail the physical danger from the decaying ship and its cargo. They really highlight this tension, don't they, between how you manage these complex long-term threats and how you communicate about them. It's where the technical challenge slams right into the public communication challenge.
Which really leaves us with this final thought for you to chew on. When you're dealing with these kinds of risk, maybe low probability day-to-day, but potentially devastating if they happen, and where the solutions are incredibly hard and expensive, what level of transparency do the communities living right there, under that shadow, what are they truly owed?
Is that stable and precautionary message enough, especially when detailed surveys seem to show things are actually getting worse, faster? Where do you strike that balance?
Okay, if the wreck explodes, do you believe the government is truly prepared for such a disaster? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.